Hello, everyone. Dr. Judy WTSF. And yes, I have the Aurora Borealis behind me. I think it's a default background here, but it's just sort of something that I'm just going to leave on the screen because it's beautiful and it's flowing and it has healing colors. And we certainly need a lot of healing tonight. This is a very heavy subject. I'm very affected by what's going on today. I think everyone is deeply affected. The range of emotions is just widespread, endless. Sadness, hopelessness, hopefulness, a lot of feelings of chaos and um, sitting here myself in my home office and just really wondering about what the Freud is going on. And I'm going to do the best that I can to break it down so people can understand it more clearly. As many of you know, I look at things from the perspective of a system gone wrong. And globally, we are showing that for reasons that I'm going to try to get into tonight. And please, this is a call-in show, so feel free to call in at 323-524-2599. I feel like I'm losing my voice a little bit, maybe because it's a metaphor for feeling a little voiceless. And I think we feel all a sense of powerlessness in this. And I'm going to break it down according to the mind map. I want to start first by reading a little bit from my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. And this is a very, very important time that we heal human disconnect because it's starting foundationally to heal on an individual level so that we can heal globally. We are of no value to contributing to the peace of other human beings until we feel that we are in a good place with ourselves and as best a place as possible. I'm going to talk tonight about reactions and cultural wounds and hole in the soul and the breakdown of the system and of course what's going on in our world with the sadness and the anger and the peace protests and the rioting and so on and so forth. And interestingly enough, back in 2001, I had a concept called Join the Human Race. And it was my attempt to create a united humanity. And that was what the intention of the mind map was. It was intended to heal global disconnect. And I couldn't at that time, and maybe I'm getting closer to having a voice. I didn't feel that I was able to get my voice out big enough and loud enough to talk about global issues. So I decided to concentrate on the micro picture that then leads to the breakdown of the macro picture. And the mind map is really a micro explanation of system gone wrong and a macro explanation of a system gone wrong. And we are going to apply it to the cultural wound that's happening today, the deep sadness and indignation and anger of what's going on with George Floyd and the people grieving him, and the many, many reactions to his heinous death, and how people are processing that, and how people are speaking up against that, and how people are being triggered by that. And at this point, we have so much chaos that even my head is spinning. So please bear with me, and this is a call-in show, so please feel free to call in, 323-524-2599. So in my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, in the preface, I start with a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he was spot on with his writing. The reason why the world lacks unity and lies broken and in heaps is because man is disunited with himself. I will add to that, humbly add to that, that the man is disunited from his fellow human beings. And I don't think that our core self was built that way. We are wired to connect. We are wired to love. We are wired to have empathy. And the further we get away from empathy and human connection, the more and more we fall into chaos and defenses and breakdowns. And I'm going to hold an optimistic view here because I love people. I love the next generation. I have a grandchild. I have children, and as many of you also. And I'm really, really concerned about the future of the next generation. And so I have to somewhere in my mind and communicate to you that sometimes behind a breakdown is a breakthrough. It's just that in order to break through, we all have to be the cause of healing human disconnect. So a little bit more about some thoughts that I expressed in the book years and years ago. Broken, in heaps, disunited. Doesn't sound good for the human race, does it? Is this our modern day fate, a warning, a wake up call? The great poet Emerson held a mirror up to the human race, and when it reflected back, he did not see a pretty sight. We are witness to a disconnect between religions, nations, social classes, a disconnect between mother and child, father and child, husband and wife, our extended families, immediate communities, and the world at large. We have broken into what I call isms, oppressive, discriminatory ideologies that fracture our interconnectedness, creating a pathway to annihilation. And these isms can include everything that fractures us from the human race. We have all kinds of isms. We have race isms, we have religious isms, we have cultural isms, we have political isms, not particularly something that holds us together. However, I also know that if we are part of an ism, part of a group, then it is our duty as a human being to use our isms to enhance the human race, not destroy the human race. So I'm going to jump to the optimism because I think we need a little bit of it. So let's jump to panel number 7 for a minute, and then we will work backwards, and I'll break it all down for you so that you can understand a little bit about this hole in the soul, cultural wounds, what's going on today, and the protesting and the pain and the anger, and there aren't enough words to describe it. So if you look at panel number 7, my intention originally was to create a united humanity. So if you see all of these globes, the blue and the yellow and the red and the orange and the green and the purple, these are metaphors for different isms, which I was hoping and trying to create a pathway to unite so that we can come together as a united humanity. And the light in the middle represents the united humanity. It represents synergy. It represents what I talk about a lot on a micro level, the 1 + 1 is greater than 2 phenomenon, where people come together, and as a result of their shared interconnectedness, they create something more beautiful, something bigger, something deeper than what they could create on an individual basis. So why is this happening? So I'm going to go back to panel 1 and mind map this. And I'm going to start with the micro model, because what hurts us on a micro scale then gets magnified on a macro scale. So let me explain what I mean by the micro scale of human pain and suffering. And if you look at panel number 1, I'm going to refer to panel 1 is our wounds of childhood. And I'm going to go over this mind map a couple of times. So we're going to use this as a metaphor for the micro and the macro. Our wounds of childhood primarily include our disconnect from our primary caregiver or caregivers, our mothers, our fathers, our primaries. And these wounds include verbal abuse, physical abuse, neglect, control, smothering, sexual abuse. And all of these abuses and neglects and acts of omission and commission, what I mean by that is we can feel the effects of disconnect, not only what is done to us, but what is not done for us. For example, if we're not nurtured, if we're not fed psychological nutrients, if we're not empathized with, if we're not attuned to, if we're not mirrored, then the psychological pain of that is encoded into the fiber of our being, because as infants we soak that in, and then we have reactions to these wounds, and these reactions take place in the amygdala, which is our emotional brain. This is the reactive brain. This is what you're seeing activated right now in our communities, and it's the fight and flight and freeze and fawn system. Fight being the explosions, and flight being trying to get away from everything. The freeze where you're paralyzed, you don't know what to do, and the fawn is just kind of like where you submit and cave in. And we're going to talk more about that as we apply it to what's going on a macro scale. Now, on a micro scale, what happens to our psyches as we develop is that we encode these messages that we learned from our childhood into panel 3, and these encodings form our core beliefs about ourselves and the world. And so if we're getting messages from our primary caregivers and from the world, which I'll talk more about, if we're getting encoded messages like, you don't matter, that's the big one, you don't matter, you're not good enough, you should never have even been born, you're stupid, you're a loser, you're not good enough, and on and on and on. I hear a lot of these negative core beliefs in my practice working with people every day, and it is so surprising what lies at the core of a human being's belief about themselves and the world. And then this gets projected into the world onto other people. And we're going to review projection also, because it's a very, very important concept in light of what's happening. And then we get triggered by our original blueprint, and then that takes us down into chaos, defense mechanisms. On a micro scale, we may choose to defend by using drugs or porn or overeating, or we may isolate, or we may use any kind of creative mechanism to protect ourselves and to shield ourselves from pain, anywhere from numbing that pain to distracting ourselves from the pain with cell phones and games and on and on and on. And because these defense mechanisms do not hold up, they end up breaking down. And this is where you see the breakdown. And in order for us to heal all of these childhood wounds, we have to go back to the cause. And from a micro perspective, we have to go to the cause of the pain and suffering, which the inception point being our primary caregivers. And we can dial it back even further and dial it back to the multi-generations of people who are our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and so on and so forth. And this has a very, very long thread. And as it trickles down into our generation, and if we don't heal from it, guess what? We pass it on to the next generation. And then the next generation psychologically inherits, I call them the psychovirus. And then here we go again. We play out that WTF, the what the Freud repetition principle. And then we go down that pathway of chaos and defenses, and then our defenses don't hold any longer. And then we break down into a destructive force. And at the breakdown point, we're either imploding, which is the most extreme example of a human implode would be suicide. Okay, the most extreme example of a human explode would be homicide, killing other people, and all kinds of things in between. Self-harm is another way, harming others, another way, harming them verbally, physically, subtly by not being there for them. And so really, I'm trying to give you a picture of the micro model and a pathway of how we got to panel number 6, which is breakdown. Now, the optimist in me wants to remind you, remind myself, remind the human race that in this breakdown, we have an opportunity to break through. We have an opportunity to break through. And sometimes we have to go real far down the rabbit hole in order for us to wake up and break through. I know this concept is talked a lot about in recovery, that sometimes people have to bottom out before they pick themselves up and start to ask very, very tough questions of themselves and start making some active choices and start the pathway to healing. We're going to reserve panel number 7, 8, 9, discuss later what healing looks like. I kind of hinted at it as synergy. The paradigm shift is a metaphor for coming together. It's synergistic. And then panel number 8 will discuss in more detail how to heal, why we're not healing today, and what we could do about it, and then balancing this all out. Okay, so here it is on a macro scale. Okay, so let's take all of our wounds of childhood and magnify it with cultural wounds. Now let's put a cultural layer over this. And this cultural layer right now is playing out in front of our eyes. And so we've got all the isms and the clash of the isms. And from a mind map perspective, this whole mind map was labeled very differently. It was panel number 5 was called the isms, and panel number 6 was called the clash of the isms. And panel number 1 was where at one time we were a united humanity. We came from the same source. And one of the ways that we know that, of course, is because when we study our DNA, we have so much more in common than we have different. And that's a fact. And one of the things that I really appreciate about modern science is that we have these wonderful ways of discovering our ancestry. And I think one of them is the spit test. I forget, there's another popular one. And I love the advertisement for that because it was just so beautifully put that if we or you as an individual take this DNA test of your genetics, you might find out that your ancestors are African American and Persian and Asian and on and on and on. So although we appear on the surface as white or black or Asian or however we're appearing, we are humans and we have a lot more in common. And it's not only what meets the eye. But now what's happened is if you look at panel 1, we have fractured. So let's look at it as a metaphor, if you'd be so kind enough to put panel 1 up. And if you look at panel number 1, the white in the background represents our light. And if you could just put that panel up, thank you so much. So let that light in the background represent our unity, our source energy, the place that we all came from as human beings. And let the splintering of that light represent the fracturing of the human race. And as the people fracture, this is the beginning of the formation of those isms. As we fracture, we then fracture even further, and we feel the pain of the fracturing. So let's do some application here of what's going on. And so we are very polarized. Let's go back to panel 1 again and use it in a different way as a metaphor. Let's call it the black and the white. Okay, so we've got the black and then the white. And so as a result of this polarization, we are creating human disconnect. And wherever we're disconnected from, we will hurt. So you will see that in panel 2, we're now experiencing reactions and pain and fracturing and so on. And then when we encode all of this, we're going to be encoding all kinds of messages into the fiber of our being, so that when we have cultural injuries, particularly now when we are experiencing and witnessing the pain, particularly today, of the Black community, the pain and suffering from having been violated for centuries. Okay, so this has a long history. So speaking of wounds, now we've got centuries and centuries of wounds, and people who have been uprooted from their families, uprooted from their cultures, people who have been put on ships and shipped to countries and made slaves. And this is, I wish I were a historian right now so I could detail it out, but that's not where I'm going here. I'm going with the idea that these injuries are so deep, and the fracturing off and the uprooting from the family and the culture is only a part of it. And then to arrive at a place where the people are dehumanized. Okay, so what could be more disconnecting than the dehumanization of a human being? And at that point, what do you think the people are going to be incorporating into the fiber of their being? First of all, they're fractured off from their families, they're split apart. And so we know from attachment theory and John Bowlby that it is so important for children to securely attach to mother and to have a father that's nurturing the mother and an extended family. Well, that's all gone. That's just non-existent. And so the foundation is just not there for this human connection. And then on top of it all, to experience a reflection back to them that you are like an animal, lower than an animal, and to be casualized and marginalized like this. What do you think the core beliefs of people who are casualized and marginalized and treated like this? So not only do they have their negative core beliefs that come maybe from their family of origin, now they have core beliefs that are reflected back to them from the world at large. Core beliefs like, I want to hear from you, so I want you part of the conversation. So please call in. The number is 323-524-2599. This is a really, really tough conversation. I really had a hard time with what I was going to say tonight because I'm experiencing a lot of the pain, a lot of the confusion, driving down the streets and just seeing the people and the confusion and the news. And so, of course, we're all affected by this. But please do call in 323-524-2599. So I want to go back to the point that I was making about negative core beliefs. So if we are looked upon as a group, of people as less than, as hated, as not mattering. Because why do you think people are making the statement that they're mattering? Black Lives Matter. Why is the state being made? Because they have been made to feel, Black people have been made to feel that they don't matter. Okay, and then there are all kinds of other core beliefs that land in that particular incorporates into the fiber of their being. And then this creates a lot of paranoia. It creates a lot of chaos. It then gets projected onto people, and then the fracturing keeps going. So I want to read an article by Stephen S. Taylor, PhD, at Leeds Beckett University in the UK. He's the author of The Leap, The Psychology of Spiritual Awakening, and we can use some spiritual awakening just about now. Racism is a sign of a lack of psychological maturity and integration. Racism has been, and unfortunately still is, a prominent feature of so many human societies that it might be tempting to think of it as somehow natural or innate. Well, the article goes on, and it's not natural and innate. I think racism is something that we learn. We're not born to hate. We're not born to fracture off from our unity based on the melanin in our skin, or the society that we were born into. And so the article goes on to say that racism is a psychological defense mechanism, but it is primarily a psychological trait, more specifically a defense mechanism. So let's look at panel number 5 again, revisiting panel 5 as a defense mechanism. And so what happens when we're attacked? Well, obviously we defend. And the more we defend, the more frightened we get, the more we resort to all kinds of mechanisms of, as I mentioned, imploding, exploding, escaping, freezing, submitting, and so on and so forth. So you see a lot of that today. Research has shown that when people are given reminders of their own mortality, they feel a sense of anxiety and insecurity, which they respond to by becoming more prone to status seeking, materialism, greed, prejudice, aggression. They are more likely to conform to culturally accepted attitudes and to identify with their national or ethnic groups. So this is very fear-based. So the more we're afraid, the more we will huddle into groups and seek some kind of refuge with our own, quote, people, forgetting that we're one human race. That part is forgotten. And so we then form these isms, and we forget too that we could use our isms to enhance the human race and bring our wisdom, our traditions, our values to add wisdom to others and to share valuable and collective psychological and physical resources, spiritual resources, and so on. I'll go on a little bit about from this article. I found it to be a very interesting article. According to terror management theory, the motivation of these behaviors is to enhance one's sense of significance or value in the face of death, to gain a sense of security or belonging, a general sense of in defense of a general sense of insignificance, unease, or inadequacy. And please, I really want to hear from you. I know people are kind of shell shocked. They don't know what to say about this. And at this point, I feel that I wish that I had a clear pathway to healing this massive human and global disconnect. I'm very thankful that I can break it down via the mind map because it gives some semblance of understanding and hopefully a pathway for people to understand that basically we have to play a better game of life. So what disconnects us? What disconnects us is harsh words, harsh deeds, harsh judgments of each other. These are disconnecting. Apathy is the final disconnector because once we have learned that there is no more human empathy for us left, we then resort to feeling a sense of helplessness. Martin Seligman talks about learned helplessness. And when we learn that we have nobody to go to, nobody to reach to, that's where it gets really scary. And that's why it's so important that people are coming together to support each other. And as I learned in my program, studying to be a psychologist, we always have ways that are helpful help and unhelpful help, and we need to distinguish between the two. And I think we have a call in, so thank you so much for calling in. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, what's your name?
Hello. Oh, Diane?
I'm sorry, what is your name?
Oh, sorry, Diane?
Diane, hi. Thank you so much for calling in on such a hard topic. And where are you calling from?
Toronto, Canada.
Okay, my home country, Canada. Okay, so please feel free to share your thoughts, and maybe you've got a different perspective because you're up there in Canada. And yeah, please tell me more what you're thinking and feeling.
Oddly enough, I was going to be a psychologist, and I decided to be a social worker because I'd been through similar things. Born in the UK, but lived in Belfast, Ireland.
Okay.
And as you know, the strife and hatred that went on there.
Yes.
So I experienced that, and then of course I had narcissistic parents in separation. So I've lived with PTSD for many years, and you know, it's that lack of self that they have that they never give you a sense of self or identity.
Yeah.
And for me, I've devoted my life to helping others and even animals, you know, because I never had love, basically.
Okay. So from the perspective,
you know, that disconnect that we feel, right?
Yeah. What do you think of what I've been talking about as starting on a micro level and then manifesting on this huge macro level of the breakdowns that are happening? Would love to hear your thoughts as a fellow person in the helping profession.
Yeah, well, it's true. It all starts from within us. You know, the only change we can make is within ourselves, right? And the only one we can truly help is ourselves. Right. We can help others to help themselves, but we're only assisting them. You can't do it for them, which I found frustrating. But also, yeah, I mean, I've studied consciousness too, and I prefer Carl Jung to Freud, of course, because of the consciousness and the fact that with the awareness of knowing we're all connected and that we're unified as one. You know, there's only, you know, like I believe in the law of one, you know, like, and that we're all interconnected.
Yes.
Therefore, whatever we think, in the, you know, we call it the microcosm, whatever, it goes out into that field, energetic field. But we're also picking up on all of that fear. Because I've kind of mastered being around narcissists, which is a nightmare. And also it is by no contact with family at all. But in general, and of course now I can actually feel a narcissist, you know, a mile away, almost smell them, but not to be crude, but, you know, it is part of this sort of systemic programming we've been undermined by. And the fact that we're human beings, like my thing was from a really young age, sitting at the curb of the road at 2 years old alone, I realized that not only am I alone in the world, which we all are, but the fact that we have to reach out to others, right?
We have to
There are some people out there.
and even though our reaction might be that we're horrified by this, I think that we have to understand that people people are at different levels of pain, and it's really important, as you know, you're in the field of helping people, that once you
Right.
go into this fight, flight, amygdala zone of reaction, then logic goes out the window, and the reactions range anywhere from shutting completely down and becoming really paranoid to out and out just explosion of feelings. And then when we've got a lot of people exploding in feelings, then we get this total breakdown. Let's just apply a little bit, just stay on the phone a little bit, because you came from Ireland. I know that you were in the middle of a big clash of the isms of the Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, and actually being British in a hostile territory, right? In many ways, North, South, Catholic, Protestant, religious and political, right?
Yeah, right. Religious and political. Okay, so
but oddly enough, it's not. It's hatred. It boils down to hatred. I figured that out at age 3, because they pick up people and kill them. One fit for a tap.
What do you think? And we're going to apply it to what's happening today and the tragedy of what's going on today. But what do you think some of the core beliefs that are being soaked into the fiber of people's being? What do you think the worldview is? What's the message that the world is sending out when people are being violated? Is not even close to the right word. What's the message here?
Well, of course, the core thing is fear. Obviously, we only have like 2 major emotions: love creates, fear destroys, right?
Yes.
Or separates.
Yes.
So, as I say, division and derision I found were the core problems, and of course, ignorance, because people are fearful of what they don't know. So, if you're saying it's religion, Catholics were afraid of Protestants years ago or whatever, but it boils down to ignorance of what they were told at home, right?
Right.
Their parents bred them to hate a specific type of person, whether it's your neighbor or whatever. And then I lived in England, and there was a class system, right?
Right.
And if you didn't own a house, then you were scum garbage, and you don't talk to those people because they don't own houses. I mean, it's been prevalent for I'm in my 60s, but it's been prevalent probably thousands. It's probably from the beginning of time. We stepped out of the cave, and somebody's bigger and better than us, and they make us inferior for whatever reason, right?
Right. So
it's not right, because
So the reflection back to the human being, especially when there's a difference in color, because a difference in color is obvious, and that's part of the pain that when the color is attacked, and the ism, the whiteism versus the blackism. What do we do about it? Well, I wish we didn't even talk that way as a human race. That's my dream, is that we don't really break down a human being according to color or according to socioeconomic status. That instead of that, we talk about, hi, my name is Judy. What's your name? Oh, let me get to know you. Let me find out about you. Let me hear what hurts you. Let me hear what offends you. Let me hear about what I can do. What can I do to make it better? Because
Right.
what's happening today, and I'd like to see more of it. There was a beautiful picture of police officers kneeling in support of people and praying. And that to me was an example of people getting out of their ism, even as a police officer ism. That person kneeling and praying is a human being, and we really need to get back down to that place. And how do we do that? We have to understand that we do that by entering into peaceful healing dialogue. We do that by not repressing our voice, that we do that by not repressing our voice in a way that invites for peaceful healing dialogue and interconnectivity and true understanding and true solutions to the problem, and the understanding that we're interconnected. So if I'm hurting or you're hurting, then we are hurting. And that's just not going to fly anymore. That's just not going to fly. So I really appreciate you calling in. I'd like to hear from more people. I know that people are feeling all kinds of things. Your thoughts, your feelings are welcome here. And one thing that I know for sure is that emotions, they ebb and flow. So what I'm feeling today, I might not exactly be feeling tomorrow or a day from now or a year from now, but let it flow, because we need to self-express. So thank you very much for calling in Canada.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Take care.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
And speaking of good night, and speaking of self-expression, it's wonderful that who we are expressing ourselves, because what happens in a family system gone wrong where people are repressed from their feelings, what happens in those families is they tend to bottle up these feelings, and then they end up imploding or exploding severely. And so as I like to say, don't implode, don't explode, unload. In this case, communicate. And if you're in your amygdala reaction, I want to refer to something that I came across because I was looking for ways to dial it down. So I have some suggestions here on. It's from a safety tip video, Vivid Learning System, and how to dial down the amygdala. Well, Bessel van der Kolk talks about the mind-body connection, and he talks about how to calm down the amygdala, and he speaks about exercise and particularly he talks about running or martial arts or getting that energy out and so on and so forth. According to I think that's a call. So I'll go on with this in a little, but I want to hear from you most of all. And hi, you are on air. And what's your name, please?
Hi, my name is Myrna.
What? I'm sorry?
Myrna.
Thank you so much for calling in. I really appreciate your thoughts and your feelings on what is going on and what can we as a human race do to create a pathway to empathize and connect and heal.
Yes. Dr. Judy, I just want to start by saying how wonderful I think you are and how much you've helped me. I
just want to tell you how difficult this this particular episode is for me, because somewhere in the corner of my mind I'm thinking, wow, we're in such a reactive form. Can anybody really say anything correctly? Okay, so thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm actually calling from the heart of South Minneapolis, and I can hear the helicopters overhead as today we had of course George Floyd's memorial here. I don't know if this is the correct episode to talk about this, but for me, I feel like there's such a strong connection between covert racism and covert narcissism.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I mean, and I just look at my own family and how, you know, just the whole, like what was the woman's name in Central Park who called the police on the bird watcher, and, you know, that kind of gaslighting. And I mean, it's just so stark to me that and this may not, again, you've struck such a beautiful tone with the episode so far. This may not be the appropriate time to go down this path.
There's no more appropriate or inappropriate. It's about self-expression, and this, you know, what I really appreciate, and I might not get it right, you might not get it right, but we've got to stay in the consciousness of empathy and connection. We have to, or we're doomed. We're just doomed.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead. Keep talking, please.
Well, you know, it's almost a literal thing, you know, when it comes to treating somebody like a black sheep, quite literally, when you're being racist. Yeah, I mean, it's like I'm myself a white, but I identify so passionately with the local community and their plight, and, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, where how important it is, and part of that is because I have grown up in a family that has, you know, narcissistic, you know, abuse.
Yeah.
So I to me, it's just, that's part of why my heart is so invested in this uprising, and I really, really empathize so deeply. I don't know. I feel like you can just articulate it so beautifully, and that you can maybe cast some wisdom on this circumstance of, you know, how to, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know what I'm even trying to say, but.
Oh, you and me both sometimes. Tonight is one of those nights. I really feel very lucky to have the mind map as a reference point. And
yeah,
I think that George Floyd, first of all, he was a human being, and now he's become a symbol for representing an outrageous and heinous act of apathy. Okay, so what's the highest level of human disconnect? It's not even anger. To me, it's apathy, when you don't care, because if you don't care, then you can step on somebody's neck for 8 minutes and blah, blah, blah seconds. I forget, because tonight at 9 o'clock, I think there's something going on where we're all supposed to shine the light into the sky for 8 minutes and I think 46 seconds. Am I right? Something like that. Okay, just to signify how long a period of time that is. Okay, so, so if we, you know, narcissism to me is a system gone terribly wrong, and that's why we work so hard at the Psychological Healing Center to heal the effects of narcissistic abuse. And now we have this video and program called the Mind Map Journey to healing from narcissistic abuse, and our life coach Yitz Epstein, who's passionate about this subject, and myself, of course. We're trying to create a pathway to heal the most vile form of human violation, and that is apathy. That is when I really don't care about you. And you know, you can talk to me, but I feel nothing, because actually I've cut my heart out, and there's nothing that you can do to get through to me. And when the people that are your primary caregivers are that apathetic, and then dare use you to bolster their self-esteem, and dare use you as we commonly refer to narcissistic supply, I call that the vampiring effect. Okay, and so what we really have to do is we've got to get really deeply under there, because apathy is the ultimate in the defense mechanism. Apathy is, okay, I've cut my heart out, you don't affect me at all, period. Therefore, I can do anything that I want because I don't care anymore. And how does a human being get to that point? Well, they've got to be pretty wounded to get to that point. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Yes.
Right? And so working with somebody that is that defended is difficult because they don't even care to come to therapy anymore because they've broken, they don't have any more trust in the world. And that's what I'm most afraid of for everybody, that we cannot break the trust of the human to human. We still have to think that in the corners of our mind, some kind of an idea that if we say it this way, or if we communicate it that way, or from the left angle, the whatever angle that we're going to be heard. The problem is that if we communicate with harsh words and harsh actions, then we become scary to the people that we want to have hear us, and then they can't hear us. Can you hear somebody that's coming at you? Can you hear somebody that's throwing something at you? Can you hear somebody that has a gun pointed to your head? You can't hear them because then you naturally go into your defense mechanism. So we have to have a better way. And I personally, I would love to create a panel of solution oriented people who are just as on board the consciousness of empathy and really are interested in creating a network, a conversation, a peaceful healing dialogue. And everyone can have the peaceful healing dialogue for free. Okay, it's in my book, Be the Cause Healing Human Disconnect. And we've got to stay in this conversation. There's just no way we can opt out anymore. And it's on everybody to find a way to, even in a moment, like those officers did, they got down on their knees and started praying. And a lot of people like that, and we have to look for people like that, people who can. I'm going to go into some safety tips because it's right here, some of the suggestions. People who can have the strength to calm themselves down, people who can have the strength to empathize with human pain, people who can attune to pain and mirror it, people who can talk in a lower, slower voice. These are survival tips. People who can who don't finger point you, people who talk the we language as opposed to this divisive kind of language. People really, what do we have the biggest shortage of? I think empathy. That's what I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We've got to reconnect those emotional nerve cells and pathways and reach out to each other and just say, look, I don't understand exactly what you're feeling, but I'm here and I'm listening. And we've got to model what Dr. John Bowlby's been talking about to each and every human being. We've got to model attunement. We have to model understanding and empathy. And again, I'm reminding you that it's very hard to do that when somebody's talking in a loud voice and moving rapidly and acting chaotically and even violently. So we've got to find a way where we could calm ourselves down so that we could start to hear each other. And I've talked so much. Go ahead and
that was brilliant. Thank you so much. I would just say that I would love to see a panel like that. I think that would be so helpful. And I just know from my own perspective, a lot of people say, how can I be a white ally? How can I help? And much like those of us who are coming out of, narcissistic abuse, having that enlightened witness is the same thing.
Yes.
The enlightened witness is the allyship that is needed. So
I love what you said, enlightened witness, because it's so important that we as people, human beings, whether we're Black, white, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Chinese, Persian, whatever we are, that we're enlightened witnesses to each other's human pain. So maybe we could start
Yes.
there. And I invite
Yes.
to contact me because I'm very passionate about the project that I began in 2001, where I made the statement that I'm sick and tired of all of the isming going on, specifically using our isms to attack each other and clash and one-upsmanship each other and project all over each other, which is what's going on. And we've got to take things on a case by case basis. I'm waiting for the moment where the news is something like Billy did this to Henry instead of the white man or the black man or the Chinese man or the Christian man or the Jewish man. Just let's all own our own stuff. Let's call each other by the human, like much more connected to our humanity, because just because anybody's a particular ism, you got to go deeper than that. Come on,
Yes.
come on. Just because I have white skin, do I have white skin? No, I'm a little bit kind of yellowish, pinkish. I don't know. Okay, and so we really, it's not fair. It's not fair to play the projection game. Okay, we've got to stop it. I know we only have a few minutes, so I invite everyone to definitely contact me and let's get a peace conversation going. And you can all have PDF of the Peaceful Healing Dialogue. And I want to read the lyrics of a song called Conversation of Peace, which I'm all inviting you to partake in. And I'll set it up if you show up. Okay, so thank you so much for calling in, and I'll end with reading this beautiful the lyrics to this beautiful song.
Thank you, Dr. Judy.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Okay, so this is called Conversation Peace by Stevie Wonder, and how amazing that Stevie Wonder, a Black man who is blind, is so eyes open and so awake and aware. And it's just a testament to the fact that sometimes our eyes are deceiving. So he has no sight, but he has a soul, and he's seeing things that maybe we need to wake up and start seeing. We need to stop seeing with our eyes so much and start seeing with our soul. Okay, lyrics, starting right at 2000 AD, as if man's atrocities to man has no history. But just a glance at life in 2000 BC, we find traces of man's inhumanity to man. So he's spanning a whole, like a few thousand years here. We find traces of man's inhumanity to man. This is the multi-generational history. There's no mystery. All for one, one for all. There's no way we'll reach our greatest heights unless we heed the call. Me for you, you for me. And I underline that. And that's the synergy. Me for you, you for me. That creates synergy. I'm adding that. There's no chance of world salvation unless the conversation's peace. We can't pause, watch, and say, no, this can't be, when there's a plan by any means to nave cleansing of one's ethnicity. Imagine a world where we're cleaning each other's ethnicity. That's pretty, yeah. And we shouldn't act as if we don't see nor hear, like the Holocaust of 6 million Jews and 150 million Blacks during slavery. All for one, one for all. There's no way we'll reach our greatest heights unless we heed the call. He's right. There's no way we will reach our greatest heights unless we come together as a united humanity. And my message is really clear on a website that I created, not very developed, but the message is there. healingglobalDisconnect.com. If you want, go there and read the message. All for one, one for all. There's no way we'll reach our greatest heights unless we heed the call. Me for you, you for me. There's no chance of world salvation unless the conversation is peace. when publicly or privately convened, may love, positivity, and life's preservation be the basic theme. And you should put your trust in some prophet in life. Give him trust, but your faith must stay with the one who gave the ultimate sacrifice. All for one, one for all. There's no way we'll reach our greatest heights unless we heed the call. So we know trust has been broken. We have to take those little pathways that are left of humanity and reconnect them. And I think that best said by, you can have a dark room, and if you have one candle, that one candle will light up the whole room. And I really want to express that you can be that one candle, and you can light up that whole room, even in a room of darkness. So thank you so much. And thank you, Stevie Wonder, for writing such a beautiful song that is so relevant to what's happening today. Good night, everybody.